Hello, this is Randy, and welcome back to another episode of Brain Break with Randy and Keitho. I wanted to touch base and tell you one more story, if it won't be the last, I'm sure, about how different things are now versus what they were when I was growing up. When I was a boy, we were encouraged to have pen pals. I remember writing letters to people around the world. Now, I didn't keep up with it. I have friends that did. I wasn't one of those people. But I remember being so excited when I'd get a letter from Germany or from Scotland or England. I got letters from Canada. I got letters from Mexico, Japan. It was exciting. Now, usually that's about where it stopped. Maybe a couple letters, but it was fun nonetheless. But we didn't have email. We didn't have texting. We wrote letters. And we also, believe it or not, we sent telegrams. I remember as a missionary being in South America, and my father wanted to let me know that I had a new little brother. I got a telegram as a missionary telling me that I had a new little brother. And they actually came and found me and said, "We have a telegram for you." That was fun. It was exciting. I appreciate my dad being courteous enough to tell me that. Who knew? Sean, you were that brother. Remember that postal rates were such that they used to sell these things called aerogrammes. What they were was a single sheet of paper that was pre-stamped, and you could mail it anywhere in the world. It had postage on it. Like I say, you could write on a lot of it, not everywhere, because you had to keep the front part of it for your address that it was going to and your return address. But everywhere else you could write. We did. I remember using those to communicate with my friends back home when we would live in Canada during the summers. I also used them as a missionary to communicate with my friends in other countries as well as my family. Like I say in a previous episode, it was expensive to call. So we used to stay up late at night to call people after the rates went down. I remember that being kind of crazy. If you see an old movie, you'll see people call a collect call and they'll make up some funny name like "Mom, I'm all right," and they'll say, "Is this Mrs. Smith?" And they'll say, "Yes," and they'll say, "I am Mom, I'm all right," on the line. I refuse to call. Now I know that the person's all right. Those kind of things actually happen. But letters, the art of letter writing is kind of a lost art. I have corresponded with people over the years in writing, and not just email, but also things like, if somebody's in prison, now they can do a lot electronically, but sometimes it's just easier to write them a letter. I do that. I feel bad for my friends that are incarcerated, but I'm grateful for the progress that they are working to make. It's got to be a tough thing to go through for both them and their families. But as I said, we didn't have email. As we get older, if you're like me, my handwriting has not improved as I've aged. My father had the most excellent handwriting of anybody I personally knew. Yet he told me his handwriting wasn't very good. He was always a little frustrated that our teachers didn't teach handwriting. They accepted whatever we wrote. I remember when I was a substitute teaching, and if I had a long-term assignment, I had to grade papers and post grades, things like that. And kids, some of their writing was so bad, trying to figure out what they were trying to tell me in their papers. Some you could tell were getting it and others just didn't get it. And they will eventually if they stick with it, but some will struggle. So I think that's a weakness of our educational system. I have a friend and he's got some weakness in his hands beyond what I have. He no longer can actually write. He has to take something like a laptop or an iPad with him to every meeting he goes to so he can take notes. Now with AI, I imagine, but I don't know, that he lets AI take notes for him. I actually have done that in meetings I've attended where I'll get AI to listen and to, with everyone's permission, make notes on the meeting. It's pretty fascinating to see the things that artificial intelligence will pick up about a meeting. I wouldn't, because I wasn't listening as carefully or the same way as artificial intelligence was. I think artificial intelligence is pretty fascinating. There are so many different tools. We're going to learn so much about it in the future. But the key thing in writing is communicating with people. When I was a junior in high school, I had the most amazing English teacher. He has since passed, but Mr. Martin taught me how to write very succinctly. That has been a hallmark of everything I write now. I used to have a coworker that nobody would read his emails because they were so long. He could take what I would write in a 2 or 3 sentence paragraph, stretch it out to 2 or 3 pages, and still not get the word across. I never was that verbose, ever. But once I learned how to write technically and precisely in a précis, that's the way I write. Still to this day, I don't use an extra sentence if I don't have to. It makes it more readable. This gentleman that I was talking about that used to write 2 or 3 pages where I'd write 2 or 3 sentences, he was very interesting because he was actually in management in the company that I worked for, and they actually needed to read things, but they weren't going to invest 15 minutes to read a 2 or 3 page email. They wanted him to put the important stuff up front, like you do in a newspaper article. He struggled with that because he told you everything. So we all have our different styles, different ways of writing. I'm sure that if he read a book, it would be amazing. If I wrote a book, it'd look like an outline because that's just the skill level I write at. I tend to take things to the tightest moment and give you just the facts. Like my point is, emails are so nice. Phone calls are better. I'm not so sure about this generation that only texts. There's a generation that we have that doesn't even listen to voicemails. Not sure that's good because I think there's a lot of us that communicate much better with our mouths than we do with our fingers in writing an email. And that you can hear things with your ears that you may not hear when you read an email or a text. I personally like to talk to people. It doesn't always happen. We're in a very busy world. I remember years ago when somebody asked me for a fax number, and this was years ago. I said, why? It can't be that urgent. And everybody was having fax numbers. Yeah, I could get them a fax number, but I didn't really need one. Just tell me what you need. I'll get you taken care of. So, but now, I mean, nobody even uses faxes because it's too slow. It's email. Get me an email. So anyway, emails versus letters. Now that we have email, let's use it. Let's use text expeditiously. But don't be afraid to talk to somebody. Get your feelings across. Make sure they're heard. Please make sure that the people you're talking to understand what you're trying to say, and that they get what you're feeling and what you know and what they need to know. Again, thank you for joining me for this episode of Brain Break with Randy and Keitho. I appreciate you. Please like and share. Your comments are welcome and wonderful. And if you get a chance, please tell your friends and family about us. Have a great day. Bye now.